Giganotosaurus was not the fastest, not the smartest, but it was one of the largest predators that ever walked the land. It ruled the southern lands of what is now Argentina, millions of years before T-Rex appeared in the north. Its name means giant southern lizard, and that name fits perfectly. This dinosaur was huge, even longer than a school bus. It had a skull almost 2 meters long and teeth like knives, built not for slicing small prey, but for tearing through giants. Its world was different from that of T-Rex. The ground was dry, the forests thin, and the air carried heat from the sun that never seemed to rest. Herds of huge herbivores like Giganotosaurus wandered across open plains. They were slow, but their size made them nearly untouchable. For most predators, attacking them was suicide. But not for Giganotosaurus. This hunter didn't rely on speed. It relied on power and patience. Its jaws could crush bone, and its bite could open deep wounds. But even Giganotosaurus couldn't bring down a massive sauropod alone. Many scientists believe it may have hunted in pairs or small groups, working together to isolate the weakest target. Imagine two of these monsters moving silently through dry grass, their shadows stretching under the sun, eyes fixed on a single injured Giganotosaurus. One would distract it, roaring and circling, while the other attacked from the side, slashing with its jaws. It wasn't about beauty, it was about survival. Despite its power, Giganotosaurus was not a perfect predator. Its brain was small for its body, and it couldn't see as clearly as some other hunters. But it didn't need perfection. Nature had already given it everything required to rule: strength, teeth, and hunger. When the wind blew, dust lifted from the plains. Bones of fallen creatures scattered under the sun, and vultures circled overhead. Giganotosaurus would walk through this landscape, its massive feet shaking the ground with each step. Its nostrils caught every scent: blood, death, and the promise of food. Every roar it made sent fear through the valley, warning others to stay away. At times, even other predators followed it, waiting for leftovers after a hunt. Giganotosaurus didn't mind. It would eat first and leave bones for the smaller scavengers. It ruled not only by strength, but by presence, the way lions do today. But the same land that fed it was harsh. When dry seasons came, water disappeared and herds moved far away. Giganotosaurus had to follow, walking for days under a burning sun, losing energy, becoming desperate. It was a game of survival, one it could win only through endurance. Sometimes two Giganotosaurus would meet near a waterhole, both hungry, both unwilling to step back. They would circle each other, tails swinging, jaws open, teeth flashing. One wrong move could mean death. The air filled with dust and sound, two giants testing who deserved to rule. The loser often limped away, bleeding but alive, lucky enough to escape. That's how life was for the southern giant. No mercy, no peace, just the endless struggle to eat and survive. And yet, when you look at its fossils today, you see more than bones. You see proof that power once had a different shape, longer, rougher, built for a world that doesn't exist anymore. Morning was quiet on the open plains. The wind carried the smell of dust and dry plants. In the distance, a herd of Giganotosaurus slowly moved across the horizon, enormous shadows rising above the grass. Their footsteps made the ground tremble. To most predators, this herd meant safety. Too big to attack, too powerful to fight. But to Giganotosaurus, it meant something else: an opportunity. The giant predator watched from behind a patch of dry trees, its massive head barely moving. Its orange eyes locked on one particular target, an older sauropod that walked a little slower than the rest. The herd kept moving forward, unaware of what was hiding nearby. Giganotosaurus waited. It didn't rush. It knew patience was its greatest weapon. Each breath was heavy. The air shimmered with heat. Then, a movement. Another Giganotosaurus appeared on the other side of the plain. Two hunters, silent and perfectly timed. They weren't talking, but they didn't need to. Their instincts did the work. One of them stepped forward, roaring to draw attention. The herd panicked. Dust filled the sky. Huge tails swung through the air like falling trees. The second Giganotosaurus ran from the side, closing in on the weak sauropod. The ground thundered. The chosen Argentinosaurus tried to escape, but its legs were too slow, too heavy. Giganotosaurus charged, opening its jaws wide, slamming them into the side of its prey. The bite didn't kill. It never did. The goal was to wound, to weaken, to make it stop. Blood and dust mixed into the air. The giant herbivore screamed, swinging its tail with a force that could crush bone. One wrong hit, and the predator would die instantly. Giganotosaurus dodged, barely escaping the strike, then bit again, deeper this time. The other hunter joined in, tearing flesh and muscle. It wasn't a clean battle. It was survival. Minutes felt like hours. The massive sauropod finally slowed, then collapsed. The ground shook when it fell. Silence followed, a silence that felt heavier than any roar. Giganotosaurus stood over its kill, chest rising and falling, covered in dust. The two predators didn't celebrate, they simply started feeding. For them, this was nature's way. No glory, just the hunger satisfied. The meat would last for days. They tore it apart piece by piece, using teeth built for tearing, not chewing. Around them, small scavengers, early raptors and reptiles, waited for their turn. The giant ignored them. When the sun began to set, the sky turned red and gold. Giganotosaurus walked a few steps away from the carcass, breathing slowly. It looked at the horizon, the endless plain it ruled. For now, it was the king of the south. But even kings had to fight every day to keep their throne. The next day would bring heat, thirst, and new battles. But for that moment, the plains were silent and only the wind moved between the bones of the fallen giant. Days for Giganotosaurus were long and heavy. After every hunt came rest, but rest was never safe. The sun was strong and the air was full of insects. The giant often found shade near fallen trees or dry riverbeds. It would lie there for hours, eyes half open, listening to the sounds around it. Every noise mattered. A step, a rustle, a distant cry. Life in its world was never quiet for long. Smaller dinosaurs like Gasparinisaura or early raptors moved nearby, staying low, hoping to find scraps of meat left from the last kill. They kept their distance, but even they could feel the pressure in the air, the silent warning that came from every movement of the southern giant. When Giganotosaurus stood, the ground seemed to react. Its weight pressed into the earth, leaving footprints the size of buckets. Flies gathered near its jaws, where dried blood still marked the last meal. It didn't care. It had eaten well, and now it watched the horizon, waiting for signs of new herds. Even for a creature this large, life was a constant challenge. It had to travel long distances to find food. The open plains gave little shelter, and water holes were rare. Sometimes it went for days without drinking, surviving only on the moisture from its prey. When it finally found water, the moment was short, a few minutes of calm before moving again. Giganotosaurus didn't have friends or family. It lived alone, like most top predators. But sometimes, from far away, another roar answered its own. It wasn't a call for help. It was a warning, a message that this land was already taken. One afternoon, a storm rolled over the plains. The sky turned dark and lightning flashed in the distance. Giganotosaurus didn't run. It walked straight through the rain, unbothered. Drops hit its rough skin and slid down like on stone. The sound of thunder mixed with its slow, deep breathing. It was a reminder that even nature itself couldn't break this creature easily. As night came, the rain stopped, and fog covered the lowlands. The giant stood still, surrounded by silence. Somewhere far away, a smaller predator howled. Maybe a young Allosaurus or an early Abelisaur. Giganotosaurus lifted its head, sniffed the air, and turned away. There was no reason to fight, not tonight. Under the moonlight, its shadow stretched across the wet ground. Long, massive, unshakable. In this moment, Giganotosaurus was more than a hunter. It was part of the world itself, built by nature to rule and survive. When dawn came, the fog lifted and birds began to call. Another day was starting. And for the southern giant, it meant one thing: keep moving, keep hunting, keep living. The plains were quiet that morning, but silence never lasted long in the land of giants. A young Giganotosaurus wandered near a waterhole, its tail leaving deep lines in the dust. It was thin, hungry, and tired of searching. Water was rare, and this place, one of the few with fresh mud, and was a prize worth fighting for. But the territory was not empty. Another Giganotosaurus was already there. Larger, older, heavier. Its skin was marked with scars, proof of many battles before. The giant lifted its head, nostrils flaring, and fixed its orange eyes on the newcomer. Both knew what was about to happen. There was no escape, no talk, no fear. The smaller one growled low, testing the air. The larger answered with a deep rumble that made nearby birds rise from the trees. The sound rolled across the plain like thunder. The young one circled slowly, lowering its head, muscles tense. The older predator turned sideways, displaying its size. A silent message. Leave now, or die here. But hunger had no patience. The young Giganotosaurus stepped forward. The first impact was sudden. Two massive bodies crashed together, sending dust into the air. Their jaws snapped, teeth scraping against bone. The sound of power echoed across the plain, deep, brutal, and real. Each tried to push the other down, claws digging into the earth, tails swinging with force enough to break trees. Blood appeared first on the young one's neck, a deep cut from a powerful bite. It roared, not in fear, but in fury. The older Giganotosaurus pushed harder, trying to end it quickly, but the younger fighter was fast. It dodged, bit the leg of its opponent, and tore away a chunk of flesh. Both stumbled, panting, jaws open, their sides rising and falling like machines built for war. The fight wasn't about food anymore. It was about survival, about who would rule this piece of land. Minutes passed like hours. Dust filled the sky, covering the sun. The younger Giganotosaurus began to slow down. Its energy faded, while the older one still stood strong, bleeding but determined. With a final burst of power, it charged, slamming its head into the other's side. The young predator fell, legs giving out beneath it. For a moment, everything went still. The victor stood above, breathing heavy, its chest covered in blood and dust. It roared, a deep, ground-shaking sound that told every creature nearby who the king was. It didn't kill the fallen rival. It didn't need to. The message was clear. This land belonged to one. The younger Giganotosaurus limped away, wounded but alive. The older one returned to the waterhole, lowering its head to drink. The red sun began to fall behind the hills, painting the sky in fire. Even in victory, there was no peace. Tomorrow another challenger might come. But for now, the southern giant stood alone, powerful, scarred, and unbroken. The world of the giants was changing. The air felt different, colder, heavier. Seasons became harder and rains came less often. The once green plains began to dry and crack. Herds of herbivores started to move away, searching for food that no longer grew. And where the prey disappeared, the predators followed, or starved. For Giganotosaurus, survival became harder every season. The strong hunted the weak, not for power, but for one more chance to live. Even the king of the south could not escape hunger. Its huge body now moved slower, bones showing under its skin. Each step left deep marks in the dry ground. One morning, the giant reached a valley it had known for years, a place where water once flowed, where it had hunted and ruled. But now there was nothing left, only dust, bones, and silence. The sky was pale, almost white, and no sound of life came from the horizon. Giganotosaurus stood still, head low, breathing slowly. It looked around as if remembering every fight, every roar, every victory that once echoed across these lands. But now there was only wind. It didn't roar, it didn't move. For the first time it seemed tired, not from battle but from time itself. Then came the day that ended everything. It began with light, not from the sun but from the sky. A fireball streaked across the heavens, brighter than anything the world had ever seen. Birds scattered, the ground shook. Moments later came the sound, a wave of thunder that never stopped. The distance, forests caught fire. The heat spread faster than any creature could run. Dust and smoke filled the air, blocking out the light. The day turned into night, and the giants of the earth vanished into shadow. Giganotosaurus roared one last time, a sound lost in the storm. It wasn't anger, it was defiance. Even as ash fell like black snow, it stood tall for a moment longer, before disappearing into the darkness. The fire burned for weeks. When it was over, the land was silent again. The era of dinosaurs, the reign of the titans, was gone. But their bones remained, buried deep in the ground, waiting millions of years to be found again. And when they were, the story of Giganotosaurus returned, not as a monster, but as a symbol of strength, survival, and the wild power of Earth itself. Millions of years passed. The fire faded, the earth cooled, and the world changed. New forests grew where the old ones burned. Rivers found new paths. Mountains rose, seas appeared, and life returned in new forms. But deep underground, the bones of Giganotosaurus remained, locked in stone, silent, waiting. Then one day humans found them. A group of paleontologists in Patagonia uncovered a massive jawbone, then ribs, and finally a skull almost 2 meters long. The scientists stared in disbelief. They had never seen a predator so huge, so perfectly built for hunting. It wasn't just another dinosaur. It was a southern king. When the skeleton was rebuilt, people could finally see what ruled these lands millions of years ago. The Giganotosaurus towered over them, long jaws lined with knives, its massive tail stretching across the museum floor. Cameras flashed, children pointed, and scientists began to tell its story. A story of dominance, power, and survival. But this time the roar was replaced by knowledge. Every fossil, every bone spoke of how the earth once lived and breathed. Giganotosaurus had returned, not in flesh but in memory. Today its name lives on, in documentaries, books, and games. People call it a monster, a hunter, a legend, but the truth is simpler. It was a survivor. In its time, it did what it had to do: hunt, fight, and adapt. And because of that, its story continues long after its bones turn to stone. Every time someone sees its image, they don't just see teeth and claws. They see what nature can create when it pushes life to its limits. They see the story of strength, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that endures. The Southern King may be gone, but its legacy lives. In every roar imagined, in every fossil uncovered, in every dream of what once walked the earth. And somewhere, in the dry lands of Patagonia, the wind still moves through the same hills where Giganotosaurus once stood. The land remembers. The king remains,